Last night, I had the privilege of hosting another brilliant conversation of what Black men carry. This morning, I'm still sitting with it, not because I feel like we actually solved anything, but or that we reached consensus, but I had a group of Black men, beautiful Black men who I love and adore, who allow themselves to be fully human in public. And that remains actually far rarer than it should be. And as I continue to reflect on this conversation, I realized that my intention was never to simply host a discussion about Black and queer men. My intention was actually to create a space where we could talk honestly about the complexity of being human. Because for, I guess, somewhere along the way, many of us have inherited a version of manhood that taught us how to perform strength, but not always how to practice freedom. We've learned how to endure, how to protect, how to survive, how to provide, how to persevere. But many of us were never taught how to rest, how to grieve, how to receive care, how to be vulnerable without feeling exposed, and how to be fully ourselves without wondering whether authenticity would cost us belonging. And for Black men who happen to also be queer, those questions often become even more layered because the conversation is rarely just about sexuality. For us, it's about visibility and safety and identity, and about navigating spaces where you are simultaneously embraced and questioned, celebrated and scrutinized, invited in and asked to leave parts of yourself at the door. And as I listened to the stories of my brothers last night, I found myself thinking about Baldwin, who says, "The place in which I'll fit will not exist until I make it." And I carry that quote with me for many years because it speaks to the reality many Black and queer men understand intimately. There are moments in my life and in our lives where belonging is not something you discover. It's something you build, something through friendship or community or brotherhood, sometimes through sheer determination to remain yourself in a world that keeps offering alternatives. I found myself thinking about Ta-Nehisi Coates in Between the World and Me. At the core, this book explores what it means to inhabit a Black body in a society that has never fully reconciled itself with Black humanity. And while Coates was writing to his son, his words continue to illuminate a broader past. See, Black people, we've been often asked to navigate complex systems that require extraordinary resilience simply to exist. The question that continues to haunt me is like, well, what happens when that resilience is the only story we tell? What happens when Black men become so celebrated for enduring pain and nobody pauses to ask whether or not the pain itself is necessary? What happens when survival becomes our identity? And so when I also think about like Keith Lemon, who wrestles with this in Heavy, again and again, he returns to the body, to the memory, to the shame, to the longing, to the ways Black people carry stories in our muscles, our posture, our relationships, our silence. And I think many Black men know exactly what that feels like. We know what it feels like to carry things that were never named, to inherit expectations we never agreed to perform versions of ourselves that made other people comfortable. And last night, we got to talk about some things openly, about brotherhood. And as a proud member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, that part of the conversation felt particularly important to me, because the Divine Nine has given many of us extraordinary gifts: friendship, mentorship, leadership, service, community, lifelong friendships and relationships. But I also believe that every institution worth loving is worth examining, not to diminish us or diminish it or to deepen it, but to actually ask ourselves, like, can our understanding of brotherhood become expansive enough to hold the full complexity of the men within it? Can we create the spaces where vulnerability is not interpreted as weakness, where emotional honesty is not mistaken for fragility, where tenderness is not viewed as the opposite of strength, but as evidence to it? And when I think about what we Black queer men carry, I also am increasingly convinced that the greatest burden is not identity itself. It's the constant negotiation, the constant calculation, the constant assessment of which parts of yourself are safe to reveal and which parts must be protected. That negotiation is exhausting and expensive emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, relationally. Yet despite all of that, what I witnessed last night was not exhaustion, it was possibility. I saw men imagining a broader definition of masculinity, one that could hold joy and tenderness, strength and softness, brotherhood and vulnerability. I saw men imagining friendships where affection is not feared, communities where authenticity is not punished, and futures where Black boys do not have to spend decades recovering from the limitations of somebody else's definition of manhood. Perhaps the real question I'm carrying today, not simply what Black men or Black queer men carry, but what becomes possible when we finally put some of it down, is what becomes possible when brotherhood expands, when healing becomes communal, when masculinity becomes spacious, when freedom becomes more important than performance, and when all Black men are given permission to become fully human.